In today's video, we're going to be going over a very interesting pattern as we transition from the wintertime into the springtime very early this year. Typically, we see this transition happen after the midpoint of March. We're seeing it before March at this point, starting up. So this is definitely 2 or 3 weeks earlier than normal. We're going to be going over multiple severe weather threats, also some snowfall opportunities mixed in there. Again, it's like a combination of spring and winter-like weather. We're going to be fluctuating back and forth. It's going to be all sorts of crazy, and we're going to go over it today. Let's dive into things, and let's take a look here at the European model real quickly. And we do have some showers. I can't believe this is the most active thing happening today, but it really is. We have some snowfall showers for the mountainous areas of the southern Appalachian. And then we have rainfall showers and even perhaps thunderstorms happening throughout the Carolinas and into eastern Virginia. Now, as we transition towards tomorrow on Sunday, February 25th, what we see is the biggest storm really is going to be this one out here in the northwest, as we have a 986 millibar low pressure center. We also see some snowfall for the higher elevations here of the Cascades and the northern Rockies as well. And then we have rainfall here for the lower elevation areas of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Now, really, the jet stream pattern, this is the 25th. Keep in mind, this is the date that we've been talking about for weeks now as the transition date for this spring-like pattern to set in, and I think that's relatively accurate at this point. We'll see that in a second, but we have a ridge still over the west, but what we see is it's stretching pretty wide, and it's beginning to intrude here on the east. So this trough is sort of moving out as it's retreating away from this warmer air that is moving in. And what we're going to see is more storms and more cold move on shore, which is just going to help the peak of this warmth to move into the east. So let's watch that happen between, again, the 25th on Sunday and the 26th here on Monday. And what we see happening is just about that. We see a trough developing out west. That ridge is now peaked over the central states and is now fully intruding on the east. Okay, and this trough is digging deep, it's starting to, and we see heavier snowfall throughout the mountainous west. So for the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Cascades, and the Rockies, we're seeing moderate to heavy snowfall. We have 1,003 millibar over Nevada, a 991 over South Dakota, and these are kind of working in tandem here to create some pretty widespread precipitation out west. Let's keep going though, and as we reach towards Tuesday on February 27th, we see this trough is now really peaked over the Four Corner states, and this ridge now is peaked over the eastern states. So expect Tuesday to be a relatively warm and humid day throughout the east here, and throughout the kind of Ohio Valley and Great Lakes area here as well. I even had a pollen alert, a high pollen alert come in today for Virginia, which is usually not expected in February at all. My allergies have been bothering me for a couple of weeks now. You guys might notice me being a little sniffly from time to time. I'm also allergic to dogs, and as you know, I got a new puppy if you watch that video. So I have a lot of things working against me in the allergy department. I'm doing okay, but you know. It does bother me from time to time. Definitely with the seasonal allergies coming in, it's going to get a little rough here for a time. I'd say the interesting thing here is that, again, we have this trough peaked around the Four Corner states, and we also have a 996 millibar low pressure center over Colorado, right at the peak of that trough. So this is what is allowing for some pretty widespread snowfall throughout that trough area, especially Colorado into Nebraska, South Dakota, and even extending into Minnesota here. We're seeing the worst of that snowfall. Also keep in mind, again, the ridge here peaking over the east. We do have some showers and thunderstorms happening in the middle of that as well. Pretty typical with higher temperatures and higher humidity to see things of that nature. Now, this is when things get really interesting. Again, I mentioned that it's not going to be a stagnant pattern, okay? It's not going to be full cold in the west, full warmth in the east with no breaks. It is going to actually be a pretty transitionary pattern, and what I mean by that is we're going to see ridges build in the east, troughs build in the west, and then all of that is going to continue to slide eastward. I reverse my camera and do all sorts of stuff when I'm editing it, so that might be, you know, my hand gestures there might be backwards. I hope it works out good, but in other words, we see, I'll show you in motion. We see the trough peaked in the west, ridge in the east, but watch how that trough just moves eastward. We see another ridge build in the west, but really quickly we're going to see another trough build in the west and a ridge in the east. So that is how the flow is going to be, and that is the perfect setup for this early season severe weather activity. keep that in mind. What we see is a 989 millibar low pressure center here over Iowa and a 995 here over the panhandle of Texas. So we have some pretty broad low pressure along the eastern front here of this trough. And what this is our northern jet is moving just about like this, and the southern jet is also embedding itself in all of this activity, and that is why we see low pressure systems along this. Expect potential snowfall for the upper Midwest, the plains, and the Rockies because of this feature, but not only that, we're going to see severe weather developing on the southeastern area of this front, so let's watch that play out. That's going to be starting Wednesday on the 28th here, and by the afternoon we see a really rigorous cold front area with thunderstorms and showers along it, stretching from the deep south in Louisiana, Mississippi, all the way up to Pennsylvania and Ohio, as well as everywhere in between, like Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Alabama, states of that nature. So expect heavy rainfall, thunderstorm opportunities, but not only that, severe weather opportunities mixed in there, which we will know more about here over the coming days. Now, as we reach the night Wednesday into Thursday, we see that this cold front does reach the East Coast. We have a really, really intense 975 millibar low pressure center over eastern Canada, and then a relatively strong 992 millibar low pressure center, that secondary low, over New Hampshire. This is all helping to extend a cold front down along all of this, just like that. So we see the cold air rushing in. Warm air is surging northward along this, and I think tornadoes will be a pretty big threat with this event, as wintertime events tend to do. But not only that, I mean, anytime you see, I'll move it back a little bit, but anytime you see this rushing warm air to the north, and then the cold air hitting it from the side, just like this, that's never a good look. This causes a lot of rotation up in the atmosphere that can be pushed down in those intense storms, and that is what causes tornadoes. And oftentimes these winter events, because of the intense jet streams that we have during the winter, tend to be relatively tornadic compared to other months. So typically you're looking for wind damage and tornadoes in wintertime severe weather events. Hail a little less common this time of year. Definitely these types of events are relatively rare in the wintertime, but when they do happen, tornadoes and wind tends to be the biggest threat. Again, don't take that as gospel. We will know more coming soon, and for all I know, we could see a bigger hail threat than I'm letting on, but definitely tornadoes and hail, or tornadoes and wind damage, tend to be much more common in wintertime severe weather threats. Keep in mind, I mean, as we see this all moving through, there's a lot of cold air behind it, and we actually do get some back-end snowfall, especially the further north you are up in the northeast. Now, these events, it's important to specify, it's harder for these to accumulate because we see plentiful amounts of rainfall and warm air ahead of it, and those are going to do two things. It's going to warm up the ground, and then it's going to saturate the ground with the rain. So wet, warm ground with snow falling on it doesn't add up to anywhere near a perfect area for snowfall to accumulate. It sounds like the perfect area for snowfall to melt, matter of fact. So accumulation is possible, but it's going to be harder than typical events for that to occur. Just like I mentioned, we see this trough transition in for Wednesday into Thursday, but look, already by Friday afternoon on March 1st, which is my birthday, by the way, we do see warm air already surging back northward here in the east, and not only that, we also see another trough building in out west. So this is a quick moving pattern, and that is what is going to allow for multiple major storms across the nation over a very short period of time here. We see more snowfall already starting up for, again, the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, the Rockies here, as we have two low pressure systems, one near Washington State and one there in northern Wyoming. And again, those are working in tandem to create this snowfall event. Now, we once again, by the time we're reaching Monday on March 4th here, see another very strong low in South Dakota there, with a cold front extending southward of it, a warm front way to the north here. So we see, again, that surging warm air out ahead of all this, the cold air moving in with the cold front, hitting it from the side. This will be likely another severe weather threat here, starting in the plains and deeper south, but likely transitioning further and further eastward. This is the very end of the model run on Tuesday morning, March 5th, and we see it transitioning to the deeper south and Ohio Valley, as well as Great Lakes areas, as we have this low now up in Canada. So the cold front is extending all the way southward through, and likely this is going to even impact the East Coast later on after the 5th of March. So yes, numerous severe weather threats. Also some opportunities for snowfall in there, but severe weather seems to be the bigger feature. And throughout the next 10 days, warmth and cold are going to be common. I would say warmth more so than cold if you're in the eastern half of the nation. But there is cold shots mixed in there that will bring opportunities for pretty severe cold and even snowfall. But those are quickly warming up afterwards and bringing those thunderstorms and severe weather threats. So a very intense, I would say, roller coaster pattern that we have ahead of us here. The GFS model, let's just dive into it and see what this model has in store with these threats. And look at the first cold front here, much more snowy. This is by Thursday morning on February 29th, and we have snowfall extending all the way down to the southern Appalachian Mountains. So although we're very confident in this storm system moving through, as it's only 5 days away, the problem is that we have disagreement here on the models, one of which showing snowfall for numerous states, one of which showing it pretty exclusively there for the Northeast. Now, remember what we talked about earlier. I don't think it's going to matter too much whether it snows or it doesn't, because I don't think it's going to accumulate very easily, if at all. So, you might see some flakes. It might be pretty if this GFS solution happens, but there is heavy rainfall and a lot of warmth out ahead of it. And I think it's going to be just that, flakes, unless you're in a very mountainous area like the Adirondacks or Catskills in New York, perhaps the Green Mountains in Vermont, or the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and then maybe extending southward of there in the Appalachian Mountain Range, but that would be for higher elevations. And that is also assuming that nothing changes, but as of now, that is how I stand on those things. By the time we're reaching Friday on March 1st, again, just like the European model, we have a trough starting out here for the West, a little bit less intense this time, but we still have the surging warmth for the central states and the eastern states. Let's move this towards the kind of pattern ahead. And what we get is another strong storm, just like the European model shows. 986. It's a little bit further west on this model, but we have more thunderstorms, numerous states involved here. As we kind of get this eruption of humidity and warmth from the Gulf, it is going to bring a lot of precipitation for these areas on this GFS model. As we keep going, we see that does move eastward eventually, but we get more cold air again by the time we're reaching around the 10th of March here, with even a low pressure system forming along it for New England, some interior snowfall, and then some thunderstorms to the south of this system, as there is, again, very warm and humid air out ahead of this very cold and dry air. When you combine those two things, you get instability oftentimes. Keep in mind, this would be a very similar situation, in my opinion, where we have the rain and the warmth out ahead of the snowfall with a brief period of snowfall following it. I think that accumulation would once again be tough to come by in this type of a scenario as well. Now, that is, again, assuming that this model is correct, and things could change as far as what the models are projecting, but as of the current projections, that is my thoughts. Let's take a look at the total precipitation here, and we see a ton out west. This is going to be the most precipitation out of anywhere here in the nation. But also in the east, we do have a good amount, I would say slightly above average amounts of precipitation here in the east with those severe weather threats, and also some rising precipitation in those warm-ups happening from time to time. That is going to combine to bring some above average precipitation to these areas. Total snowfall on the European model, we see a ton out west here. No surprise at all, as their winter time usually extends well into April, sometimes even May. So don't expect this to end anytime soon. But we see minimal amounts of snowfall east of the plains. And this likely wouldn't even accumulate, like I mentioned earlier. So maybe an inch or two of snowfall falling, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stick. Again, maybe for some of these mountains in West Virginia, perhaps here for the Adirondacks of New York, and maybe even extending eastward into the Green and White Mountains of New England. But that is going to be pretty exclusive for higher elevation areas. Now, the GFS model, we do see plenty of snowfall out west. So just like your European model, that's going to get a check. And then we get a little bit more here in the east, as we see a little bit more wintry storms moving through on the GFS as opposed to the European model. But again, I still think that this snowfall would have a tough time accumulating. Perhaps for the mountainous areas, we would see that, but likely not for anywhere, underneath the very highest tops of these mountains. Now, for the temperature pattern overall, no surprise, we expect kind of a roller coaster. We see a cold air mass here for the day tomorrow on Sunday, February 25th. Warming up already by Monday afternoon on February 26th, and we see very intense warmth in there. Real quickly, I want to talk about this cold air mass. This is a negative PNA. That stands for Pacific North American Oscillation, and that is really the driving force behind this warm air that is moving into the central and eastern areas. What we see happening is a trough moving in here. This causes all the warmth that would be over the west to have to basically move east of these areas, and that is exactly what we see here. Now, as we keep going, so let's take this towards Tuesday on the 27th, we see it's much more centered over the east. This trough is very, very large over the west and intense, by the way, as well, as we're seeing temperatures as far below normal as I'd say 20 to 30 degrees in some of these areas, especially in these magentas. So very, very, very cold temperatures and very warm compared to normal in these eastern areas, especially the browns, where we're talking about 15 to even 30 degrees above normal. So very extreme differences compared to normal. Also, another factor as we look at that severe weather, look at how intense this cold is right here. And then look at how intense this warm air is right here. And then look at how close they are together. We're talking about, very, very minimal distances here compared to what we typically see. And this is right along that cold front in here. So these thunderstorms are going to be fueled by this extreme warmth compared to normal that's moving up ahead of that cold front. And then they're really going to be fired up by this cold, dry air that is rapidly moving into this area. These two air masses, these separate air masses, basically being forced together is the driving force behind all of this activity that we do expect. We see that extend eastward, we get a trough in the east, but already we see that trough rebuilding out west and warmth once again returning to the east by the time we're taking a look at Saturday, March 2nd. And that continues for pretty much the entire model run here all the way until March 10th, where we still see mostly below normal temperatures out west and those above normal temperatures here for the central and the eastern states. So this is going to be still a classic negative PNA pattern, taking us likely pretty close, if not beyond, the midway point of March. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. This has been a very fun one. We've been able to kind of just dive through the upcoming pattern. Thankfully, this video is coming out a little bit earlier. I'm very happy about that, as I'm sure you guys will be as well. I want to get earlier and earlier with these, get them out in the afternoon when most of you are on YouTube, and hopefully we can get the information out to as many people as possible that way. I hate when I upload so late that I know people are missing it because they're already asleep. I don't want to do that, and that is never ideal. So be sure to subscribe for more daily weather videos just like this one. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.